Hey guys, it's Anna. Welcome back to Monday. It's our story video, and I'm going to pick up where we left off last week, which was the break-in at my mom's house. So I think 2, maybe 3 months went by. Yeah, about 3 months went by, and I just continued with my same old ways. I was using really badly, committing crime, not staying in touch with my family or really even my daughter at that point very much, and I was just running amok. So things were really, really ugly, and it was strange because I ended up getting into a really bad car accident. But the strange thing about it was, for about a week prior to the accident, I started getting this really severe anxiety, like this sense of like this really serious impending doom. It's still something that I don't really understand or know why I felt like this, but I knew something really bad was going to happen to me. I knew it, and I spoke about it to my boyfriend. There were several times where I just broke down in tears and cried, and I mean, I was shaking. I would be crying so bad, and I was just so scared. I just kept telling him, like, I just have this really terrible feeling that something really bad is going to happen to me, and I can feel it, like it's coming. I didn't know what it was going to be or what that was going to look like, but I just had this dark cloud above my head, and I had this really intense feeling of impending doom. And anyway, so I was staying in Issaquah at this point. And we were both dope sick. So we were leaving the house that we were staying at, and we both got in the car. My boyfriend was driving. I was in the passenger seat. And we left, and we were going to be dropping off one of our friends to where she was going. And then we were going to go try to find some dope because we were both sick. We needed some drugs. So this particular friend used to ride around in our car with us a lot, and she was always telling us that we needed to stop fighting, because we would be in the car and we'd be bickering and fighting and yelling at each other, and we'd be like, hitting each other, and it was always ugly. And she was always, and whenever that happened, when she was in the car with us, she was always like, you guys have to stop fighting while you're driving. You have to stop. Like, something bad, you're gonna crash. This is not safe. You guys need to quit it, cut it out. So we'd been fighting. Mind you, we were both very dope sick, and we were irritable and angry at each other. And so we were arguing and bickering and fighting, and things were getting kind of heated. And of course, my friend is in the back seat, and she's like, you guys, knock it off. So we got to the place where we dropped her off, and she stepped out of the car, and she looked into the driver's side window, and she was like, do not fight, you guys. Just get to your destination safely. Stop fighting in the car. So whatever, we left. Whatever, we didn't even think twice about it. And about a mile down the road, we crashed. And it turned out to be a really bad accident. We continued to fight after we dropped her off. We're going down a windy road in Snoqualmie, and it was the middle of the day, but it was rainy and really slick and wet outside. And we went around a corner, and we had been fighting, physically fighting each other. Like I was throwing punches at him. He was driving, he was whacking me back. And we went around a corner too fast. I don't think he was able to even be paying attention because I was being so physical and aggressive with him. And we ran straight into a telephone pole. And I had my feet up on the dashboard. So I had my feet up, and the airbags deployed. So my feet were literally on top of where the airbags came out. And it folded my body at such high impact so quickly. I just folded, like sandwiched right in half. And I was in complete shock at first. I had no idea. I was severely injured. Very serious, life-threatening injuries. But I was conscious right after it happened, and I was in shock. So there wasn't any really outward signs of injury, and so I thought I was okay. I remember feeling very panicky and like, whoa, what's going on? And so my boyfriend he jumped out of the car. We were both okay at that point. He jumped out of the car, came to my side, and he checked on me, and he was like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, I think so. I think I'm okay. My biggest concern at that point was that, oh shit, did anybody see this happen? Are the police going to come? We have drugs, we have paraphernalia in this car. And he wasn't supposed to be driving. He was driving on a suspended license. So as soon, and he was panicking because he also had warrants for his arrest. So as soon as he had gotten out of the car, came to my side, figured out that I was okay, he left the scene of the accident. He had said something along the lines of, oh babe, the cops are going to come. I have to get out of here. And I think, out of anger and frustration that was where his head was at that moment, and he was talking about leaving me there by myself. I was like, whatever, go, bye, see you later. And so he left. Now I want to make this very clear. He had no idea that I was hurt. Absolutely none whatsoever. I had no idea that I was hurt at that point. I was in complete shock. This, from the minute that we crashed to the point that he left, there was maybe 2 minutes. So it wasn't like he knew that I was severely injured and just left me there to bleed out and die. It wasn't like that. And I know that rumors went around my hometown, and he was brutally ostracized for a long time about this. It wasn't right for him to leave my side, no matter the circumstances, but he did not leave me knowing that I was hurt. So now that's out there. That's the story. That's the realness. That's what happened. So I ended up, there had been someone driving behind us. They pulled over, and they had seen my boyfriend leaving, and they were like trying to stop him, but he was long gone. So they came over to me, and I just remember feeling this really weird feeling, like I felt really like lightheaded, and kind of just like not in my head all the way. What had happened when the airbags deployed is my knees kicked up into my face, and I kneed myself in the face with both my knees. And so, but I still had no idea that I had some serious injuries that had happened. I was completely like in shock. So he came to the guy who had stopped. He came to the car and was asking if I was okay, telling me not to move. He was like, you can't move, stay right there. I have the police or an ambulance coming. And I'm like, no. I was like, no. Like, we don't want the police here. But then, I started to try to get out of the car, and then all of a sudden I had this horrific pain in my stomach. And I was like, oh, no. And I started getting really panicky, and I was like, oh my God, like I couldn't move. There was like fire inside my stomach and all this really bad stabbing pain. And then my head started to feel really like dazed, and I was like, oh my God, I think I actually did get hurt. And I started panicking, and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm in a lot of pain, and the guy's standing right by my side, and he's like, it's okay, calm down, the ambulance is coming. It seemed like it took forever for the ambulance to get there. I was still very concerned about the drug paraphernalia in my car, but I was also concerned that I was dying. So I was very scared, and I was by myself with a stranger. So the ambulance got there. The paramedics got me out of the car, put me on a stretcher, put me into the ambulance, and the last thing that I remember is I was on like a gurney thing or whatever in the back of the ambulance, and the paramedics were asking me questions. What's your name? Do you know where you are? Do you know what happened? Where's your address? Blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden I remember that like my vision was just like tunneling. That's what it felt like. Like I felt like and I could tell that I was going to lose consciousness. And I was screaming. I was like, no, don't let me fall asleep. Don't let me fall asleep. Like I thought I was dying. And my vision just kept on getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's the last thing I remember. Apparently, though, I remained conscious throughout the whole ambulance ride and remained conscious all the way into the hospital. And I was able to apparently speak with the doctor and let them know that I had pains in my stomach. I have no recollection of this, but that's what happened. My memory stops at getting into the ambulance. And then I had been in the hospital, and they did a scan on my stomach. They did not see anything. And so they were getting ready to discharge me. And by the grace of God, I mean, had I been discharged from that hospital and walked out of there, I would have been dead that night. Because there were like I said before, there were no outward signs of injury. All of my injuries were internal. all of them were extremely serious. So, and the scan somehow, I don't know how, didn't show that I had a very bad, I had ruptured my colon from when I'm assuming from when my body had folded and at such high impact, and I just gonna, I think that's what ruptured my colon. I also had a very traumatic brain injury, and my brain was swelling inside my head. This was something that they weren't aware of yet either. They didn't even think to do a brain scan at this point. But anyways, they were getting ready to discharge me because they can't see that I'm really hurt. And I went into a delirium, complete delirium. I guess my eyes were rolling back in my head. I was screaming and talking all this gibberish, and I was flailing around, and they had to strap me down to a bed, and they induced me into a medically induced coma. Now, this is just the very beginning of this story. The story goes on and on and on. I ended up being in the hospital for 3 months. I had to learn how to walk, talk, eat, swallow, move, everything again. But this is the very beginning. There's going to be a few different segments on this one situation because it goes on, and there's so much drama intermixed in this story. There were so many issues and so many instances where I was just hanging on by a thread. I was moments away from losing my life during this time in the hospital. So many things kept on going wrong. I kept on noticing other injuries. And so it ended up being one of the most traumatizing experiences in my entire life. But in the same way, it was also a very eye-opening experience for me. So I can't say that it was all bad, but it was very scary. The way that I looked changed. My personality changed in some ways. What I remember is not the same. I function extremely well. I don't think you would ever really be able to know that I suffered a lot of brain damage. It's kind of a miracle. They assumed that I was going to probably be a vegetable. But there are lots of spots in my memory. So yeah, this is where I'm going to leave off with this one, you guys. This is long. I've talked forever. Thank you so much for listening to this whole entire thing. The next video will be about my complications in the hospital. We'll just give you kind of like a chunk by chunk as we go through the next 3 months of my life in this segment after this car accident. But thank you guys so much. I'm going to try to upload some photos to one of these videos. It probably won't be this one, but maybe the next one of like a before the accident and then right after the accident happened, because physically my body changed so much. I lost all my hair. I got down to about 109 pounds at one point. So it's an interesting thing to see and look back on as well. So anyways, thank you guys so much. My mother is up next. She's going to be telling you her perspective on this whole thing, which is frightening, I'm sure. I didn't stand in her shoes for it, but I can only imagine. So thank you guys so much for watching. We love doing this. We love it. And we'll talk to you guys on Thursday. Bye.
Hi, I'm Ann, Anna's mom again. So we pick up the story on March 25th. 2014. I had just gotten home from actually looking at a house I was considering moving into, and realized I had a message on the phone. Called back, and it was a nurse from Overlake Hospital, and she said that she found my number on Anna's emergency contact form that she'd filled out when she had her baby there, and that Anna had come in via ambulance from a car accident where her airbag had been deployed, complaining of abdominal pain. They'd run a CT scan and could not find the cause of the pain. And then when Anna came in, she was coherent and speaking to them just fine, but that now she was no longer coherent and she was convulsing and having seizures. And they did not know why. They thought possibly a drug overdose, maybe a meth overdose. She said, we're about to move her to the ICU. How quickly can you get here? So, thank God, my dear friend Karen, I called her. She just came and picked me up. We were at that hospital in 15 minutes. Her dad was already there. Called him immediately too, and Bill was already there. And yeah, Anna was convulsing, and eyes had rolled back in her head. All we could see was the whites, and she was seizing, and there was spit coming out of her mouth, and she was yelling gibberish, and they'd had to tie her body down because she was flailing around. They didn't know what was going on, so they decided to induce a coma. And they did, and her vital signs were not okay. She wasn't okay. Her body was shutting down. They had to put her on a ventilator almost immediately. Her kidneys shut down. Her arteries and veins were already collapsing. Anyway, they really were at that point, and she didn't come out of the induced coma. So that was a really long night, and at some point during that night, I put up a Facebook message that just said, hey, please pray for my daughter, Anna, whose life hangs in the balance. She was in a car accident today. And the next day was pretty scary because she didn't come out of the coma. Now, she was in her own coma, and we didn't know why. And she was swelling, and she was swelling up because they were pumping fluid into her. Of course, they'd have to, and her kidneys had shut down, so her body just kept getting bigger, and that was pretty scary. Probably 60 people showed up at the hospital that day. It was just about a good 25-minute drive from our community. A lot of these people were the same people who'd bought Anna baby gifts twice, and a lot of them knew she, obviously they all knew she'd been using and struggling with drug addiction, and most of them knew about the breaking into my house, and I think a lot of people thought she had something to do with that, but there didn't seem to be any judgment when her life was hanging in the balance, and that was really beautiful. So many families showed up, and so many good friends, and that was a really beautiful thing. That was really helpful to both her dad and I, and her sisters, and the rest of our family. The next day, I had just gone across the street, actually, to get out of the hospital for a little bit and have lunch with about 25 of my closest girlfriends who showed up. And who just sat down, and got a call on my cell phone that said, get right back here. She's brain dead, one side of her brain. A nurse had come in to do a check, and they'd recognized that anyway, there was no activity there. So I tore back across the street, and my good friend Sherry drove me. She'd just shown up for lunch. She didn't get any either. And I got up to the floor where Anna was, and we were talking with her doctor, and he said that we were losing her. And she was still in the coma, but now was the time to say goodbye. Her sisters, her two sisters were there, and her dad and I. And we were just about to go in and say goodbye to her unconscious self when her neurosurgeon who was there showed up in her room, and he said, well, wait a minute. He said, I took another look at her scan that we did on her head, and he said, I found a small spot of blood there, and he said, I don't know that this is an overdose situation. He said, I think it's likely she did have head trauma, and that could be causing this coma and the rest of these problems. And we can do a bilateral craniotomy, which is basically where you cut out the skull bones in your head on both sides and allow the brains to swell after trauma. And he said, I don't know if that will help her or not, but we will lose her by the end of the day for sure. If we don't do this, she'll be dead. If it does help her, we don't know what condition she'll be in. She's already brain dead on one side of her brain, so we will anticipate some significant brain damage at the very least. She could be in a vegetative state forever and need care. He actually gave us a choice, the way I remember it, and there was no choice. Of course it was, yeah, get in there and do it. So they prepared her for surgery very, very quickly. She had all that long, beautiful hair, like she has now again, except that it was not healthy at that point. But that had always been kind of her trademark. They cut off the ponytail, and they shaved her head, and they took her into surgery. And we didn't know whether she'd make it through surgery or the end of the day. She came out of surgery, wasn't a complicated one, a couple hours later, and didn't come out of the coma. And so we didn't know, and we weren't going to know for a while. And that's where I'm going to leave the story today. There's a lot more to tell you of just this week, and and the story goes on for quite some time with some pretty interesting twists and turns, but that's where I'll leave it today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for joining us on this journey.